Welcome to the Marketing Behind Rapid Growth, the podcast where we explore the strategies, decisions, and growth engines behind some of the world's most successful technology companies. Today, we're talking about 6sense. Picture a conference room inside Cisco, sometime in 2012. A consultant named Amanda Kahlo is walking a room full of executives through her analysis of buyer behavior. She's confident. Her firm does $10 million a year helping companies like this one make sense of their data. She thinks she knows exactly what this meeting is about. Then a marketing executive interrupts her. "Amanda, do you know what you're doing here?" She says she's predicting sales. He shakes his head. "No. You know our buyers are going to buy before they even know they're going to buy." The room goes quiet, and then it doesn't. People start talking over each other about sending purchase orders to customers before a single sales rep has picked up the phone. And somewhere in that noise, Amanda Kahlo realizes her consulting business is obsolete the moment she leaves this room. Because what these people actually need isn't a report. It's a machine that does this automatically for every company all the time. That's the moment 6sense was born. Not in a garage, not in a pitch deck. In a meeting where a services provider realized she was standing on top of $1 trillion problem, and the only way to solve it was to stop selling her time and start building software. This is the story of how that instinct became a $5 billion company. And it's a story with a twist because the thing that nearly killed 6sense wasn't a lack of vision. It was a product that worked but that nobody trusted. Let's start with the problem itself because it's worth sitting with. For most of the last 2 decades, B2B marketing ran on what's called the gate and wait model. You write a white paper. You put it behind a form. Someone fills out the form. Congratulations, you have a lead. That was the entire playbook. But here's the number that should have broken that playbook years earlier. Only about 3% of website visitors ever fill out a form. 3%. The other 97% are still there. They're reading your pricing page. They're comparing you to your competitors. They're consuming trade publications and asking colleagues for opinions. They're doing everything a buyer does except the one thing your marketing team can see. 6sense called this the dark funnel. And the implications were brutal. By the time a prospect finally raises their hand and talks to a salesperson, somewhere between 70 and 90% of their buying journey is already over. The seller isn't opening the conversation. They're walking into the final act of a play they never got to read. 6sense's founding bet was that you could use big data and machine learning to light up that darkness, not by asking people to identify themselves, but by reading the signals they were already leaving behind and figuring out which companies were quietly, anonymously in market to buy. It's a brilliant insight. It is also, as Kahlo would learn, a very hard thing to get funded. She pitched 66 venture capitalists. She sat through 22 all-partner meetings. 22 rooms full of decision makers, and not one of them said yes. The feedback was almost always the same. The market need is real, the customer logos are real. She had Dell, she had NetApp, but there was no world-class engineering team behind the vision. She had the what. She didn't have the how. The breakthrough came through an introduction to a group of engineers who had built the big data infrastructure behind Hulu. 2 teams, 2 skill sets, 1 merger. Within weeks of joining forces, term sheets started arriving. 6sense closed a $12 million Series A and started building in earnest. And for a while, it looked like the hard part was over. It wasn't. By 2017, 6sense had reached $5 million in annual recurring revenue, which sounds like traction until you look at the trend line. Growth had stalled. And worse, customers were leaving. The company lost nearly 1/3 of its active customer base in just 2 months. Here's what was happening. 6sense's product told sales reps which accounts were hot, ranking them on a scale of 1 to 4. Technically, the data was good, but it was delivered as a black box, a number with no explanation. And sales reps, who are professionally skeptical people because their entire job depends on not wasting time on bad leads, looked at a mystery score and did the rational thing. They ignored it. This is the moment I want you to sit with, because it's a lesson that shows up again and again in B2B software, and it's easy to miss if you're only looking at the technology. 6sense had built a genuinely intelligent system, but intelligence without explanation isn't trusted. It's tolerated briefly and then abandoned. Knowing everything about a buyer means nothing if the person on the other end of that insight can't act on it or doesn't believe it. Data alone wasn't the product. Trust was the product. And 6sense hadn't built it yet. This crisis forced a leadership reckoning. In 2017, the board and the founders made the kind of decision that a lot of technical founders resist, because it means admitting that the skills that got you here aren't the skills that get you to the next stage. They brought in a professional CEO, Jason Zintak, a veteran of SAP and Oracle with deep roots in sales leadership. What's notable here isn't just the hire, it's how it happened. Zintak spent 6 months, by his own account, dating the founders before taking the role, making sure their visions for the company actually aligned before he stepped in. That's not a small detail. Founder transitions blow up all the time because everyone assumes alignment that was never actually tested. Zintak tested it first. Once he arrived, his first move was to rip open the black box. If the platform said an account was in market, it now had to say why. Which keywords were they researching? Which competitors were they comparing? The score stopped being an oracle and started being evidence. His second move was arguably even more important. He recognized that 6sense had built a system that could see the buyer, but couldn't yet let anyone act on what it saw. If the data said IBM was suddenly in market for networking routers, so what? What happens next? Zintak pushed 6sense to build an activation layer, a demand-side platform that let marketers immediately target those anonymous in-market buyers with display ads and social content the moment the intent signal appeared. This is the pivot that turned 6sense from a predictive scoring tool into a full account-based marketing platform. Insight plus explanation plus action. That combination is what finally made the black box open, useful, and trustworthy. Now here's where the story gets, I think, genuinely unusual. And it's the part of the 6sense story that has the most to teach anyone building or marketing a product today. While Zintak was rebuilding the operational engine, the company's CMO, Volodymyr Khomichenko, who would later become Chief Revenue Officer, made a decision that most B2B marketing leaders would have called reckless. She got rid of the forms. All of them. She called the initiative Project Bold Moves, built on 3 rules. No forms, no spam, no cold calls. In an industry where marketing qualified leads and gated white papers were treated as sacred infrastructure, Khomichenko walked away from the entire model. Her logic was almost defiant in its simplicity. If 6sense's product could actually identify anonymous buyers without them filling out a form, then making people fill out forms was proof that you didn't believe in your own product. So she stopped asking. The marketing team used 6sense's own intent data to identify which companies were already researching the category, warmed those accounts with targeted content, and let sales reach out only once a prospect was already deep into their research. Think about what this does strategically. It's not just a lead generation tactic, it's a live demonstration. When a prospect gets a personalized, unnervingly relevant outreach and asks, "How did you know I was looking for this?" The answer is the product, not a case study, not a slide with a testimonial, the actual mechanism, working in real time on the very person deciding whether to buy it. Marketing had become the demo, and the results back it up. This approach drove a 50% increase in win rates, and eventually the company was sourcing 80% of its revenue directly from marketing-led efforts. Khomichenko had essentially turned the marketing department into the company's most convincing salesperson because it wasn't describing the product's capability. It was performing it. There's a broader principle buried in there for any company building something genuinely differentiated. If your product does something remarkable, find a way to let your marketing be powered by that same mechanism. Don't just tell people what it does. Let them experience it happening to them. By 2021, 6sense had reached unicorn status, but the leadership stayed, in their own words, operationally paranoid, aware that the intent data category they'd essentially created was starting to get crowded, and that generative AI was about to change what outreach even meant. Their answer was to keep moving down the funnel through acquisition. They bought Slintel to add sales intelligence and contact-level data so that once an account was flagged as in-market, reps didn't just know the company. They knew exactly who to call. They bought SalesWhale to build conversational email, using AI agents to handle the early, repetitive back and forth of scheduling a first meeting. By the time 6sense raised a $200 million Series E in 2022, its valuation had doubled to $5.2 billion in under a year. And the company itself had quietly transformed again. from a marketing technology point solution into what it now calls a revenue AI platform, a system meant to unify data across marketing, sales, and customer success into one connected view of the buyer. So what does a story like this actually teach us? First, solve for the why, not just the what. 6sense's near collapse in 2017 wasn't a data problem, it was a trust problem. Any product that makes a recommendation, especially an AI-driven one, has to show its work, or the humans it's asking to act on that recommendation will simply opt out. Second, the founder to CEO transition can be a strength, not an admission of failure, when it's built on genuine complementary skill and real alignment. Amanda Kahlo had the vision. Jason Zintak had the operational discipline to scale it. The 6 months he spent making sure their goals actually matched before taking the job is a detail worth remembering. Third, and maybe the most transferable lesson of all, marketing can be a laboratory for proving your product, not just promoting it. Conant's decision to abandon forms wasn't a marketing tactic dressed up as a risk. It was 6sense using 6sense, in public, as the pitch. And fourth, in the age of generative AI, when everyone can spin up a slick interface on top of a large language model, the real moat is proprietary data. 6sense's advantage isn't a clever algorithm anyone could copy. It's years of accumulated, structured intent signals that a wrapper company simply doesn't have. Today, 6sense generates over $200 million in annual recurring revenue with a team of around 1,600 people. Amanda Kahlo has since moved on to a new venture called One Mind, and she describes the split neatly. 6sense was built to find buyers. Her new company is built to close them. Different companies, same obsession, removing the friction between a buyer's intent and a seller's ability to act on it. The through line of this whole story is almost deceptively simple. The companies that win aren't the ones shouting the loudest into a crowded market. They're the ones paying the closest attention to the signals everyone else is ignoring. The 97% of buyers still sitting quietly in the dark. This was the marketing behind rapid growth. See you in the next episode.